Season 3 2021 was the first time I've ever committed to GT3 cars on iRacing, and I've discovered the highest level, cleanest racing I've ever had in simulators, period. We're now going into Season 4 2021, and the cars have gone through massive updates, including a new tar model, ABS that's completely different than how it used to work, and some massive changes to the cars as well. So what I've decided to do is compare all 8 GT3s that are currently running the official GT3 series. I'm going to use the fixed setup, and I'm going to do it on Road Atlanta and Hungaroring, and I'm going to tell you how easy each car is to use. So not only the lap times, but how easy they are and what their main characteristics are, just to give you a little bit of a heads up so you'll know where to focus and potentially save you some time. Before we get started, if you find some value in this video, if you enjoy it at all, leave a like, let me know in the comments what you think, and most importantly, please subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. Alright, so we have the Porsche 911 GT3R, and the first thing I've noticed about this car is how stable it is on low speed corners. Coming out of low speed corners specifically, you can just smash the throttle and the back end will not step out. You're not even kicking in the traction control, it's just planted. Now on the other hand, it does create some understeer, quite a lot of it in fact. So on a track like Hungaroring, it was really costly and did cost me some time. I needed that rotation from the back end and it didn't happen. On the other hand, you have a lot of lift off oversteer, so on entry the car can rotate a lot, so you can just nail that apex every time, but you will have to be careful. Took me some time to get used to it because it can get snappy. Big advantage, two big advantages actually for this car, is the fact that it's very good on cold tires. You can just push it right off the bat, which is a huge advantage if you're just trying to survive the first lap. With this new tar model, that will become an issue for some cars. And the fact that it's also very good on the curbs, so I really enjoyed slamming it into the curb. The car didn't care, it just, it ironed it out and stayed flat, and I put the power down as soon as I dismounted the curb, and that made it very easy to use. So definitely recommend for people who like Porsches and the way they handle, because it's very it's very reminiscent of an actual Porsche, I think, and people who just want an easy car drive and it's somewhat competitive. It's not the fastest car, but for most people that shouldn't really matter that much, because most people aren't fighting for the top 5 in top split. Most people are trying to get by and trying to survive the race. So I think this car is, one of the good ones you choose for this season. It will get the job done. Imagine driving a McLaren and realizing it's too stable. That never happened with McLarens before. So this is the first time on iRacing where I feel like the McLaren is super easy to use. I mean, it's not the easiest car to use, but it's one of the good ones. If you own this car and was always afraid of it, now's a good time to jump in. It's pretty good on cold tires, not as good as the Porsche, for example, but decent. It has a lot of understeer on hard braking and coming into low speed corners. So you can... Well, it's an advantage and a disadvantage, really. It does make it a little bit harder to find the apex, but on the other hand, you can just dive into the corner and not be worried about, losing the back end or something unpredictable will happen. So there's that advantage. It's also pretty good on curbs and bumps. It actually creases them out pretty well, and I enjoyed driving it on Road Atlanta and Hungaroring. It seemed to work pretty well. In terms of pace, it's up there. It's pretty competitive right now. The one thing that is kind of a negative here is the high-speed entries. When you're going into high-speed corners, the back end does tend to get a little loose, but I feel like you kind of need it with this car because it's so stable. So you need that high-speed rotation, and as soon as you go back to the power, the car stabilizes and sinks in. The new update did wonders for the McLaren, and I really recommend you to give it another go because it's one of the most fun cars to drive. The driving position, you're sitting way low on the ground, and you feel like you're going 200 billion miles an hour. So definitely give it a try if you already own this car, or consider it if you're trying to find a new GT3 to drive. The Fjord. Well, it's very fast now. It really is quick, but there's a huge problem. they didn't fix the suspension, or in fact maybe made it worse. I don't know if you can fix it in open setups, but with the fixed setup, the car is way too stiff to a point that you cannot touch any of the curbs on Hungaroring, which are pretty flat. They're flat curbs. They're not a big deal. No other car had an issue there. And Road Atlanta, forget about it. You can get pace out of it, but you cannot touch any of the curbs. So it requires, you know, a surgical precision to drive around the curbs constantly and avoid the lines that have the bumps that make the car go 4 wheels in the air, because it's just so stiff. There's no travel. And if you do mount a curb, even if you catch it right, on the dismount it will just bounce almost endlessly, and you won't be able to steer or put power down, which kills the car. Because I feel like if they made it softer somehow, it would have been probably the fastest car around, or one of the fastest at least. So something to keep in mind, that in open setups, if you're feeling comfortable fixing the stiffness, you might have a winner on your hand. But for fixed, I will not drive this thing in a million years. It's just so unpredictable. You catch a curb once and it could be game over. You could be in the wall instantly and you have nothing to do about it. On cold tires, pretty stable. Some understeer is to be expected, but it kind of mitigates that as they warm up and feels a little bit nicer. But it's still kind of understeery, which also makes it very stable. It's a very quick car, too stiff. It's a shame I can't race it. Good luck if you're trying to race it this season. Coming up to the BMW M4, and there's a few things that are good, few things that are bad. All in all, one of my favorite cars, I have to say. It's been that way since it came out because it's very predictable. So the rear snaps when you're on cold tires, trying to accelerate, especially out of low speed corners, but it's also very predictable. You can catch it very easily. It's not a hard car to manage on the limit. On the other hand, losing the rear end is not fast, so it's kind of tricky to get good speed out of it on cold tires. You do get some mid-corner washout, a little bit of mid-corner understeer, especially in low speed as well. And you know, it exaggerates when the tires are cold, but you do get some of it even on warm tires, so keep that in mind. Once the tires warm up though, the key thing about this car is rotation in high-speed corners. Accelerating through 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th gear. You barely even reach 6th with this car, but let's say 4th and 5th. If you're trying to go flat out through a corner, it will rotate very nicely and be very easy to manage on the limit. That's the beauty of this car. That's what makes it so great on Nordschleife or Bathurst, places like that. It just, you know, it really deals with that well. Also very good on the curbs and bumps. It's a pretty soft car. It manages it well. So on Road Atlanta, it was, you know, it was a treat to drive. A little bit harder to negotiate through Hungaroring, through all the technical bits, especially when the tires are cold. But even if they're not cold, I would have to, sometimes I would find myself short shifting from 2nd to 3rd, keep the back end from snapping right on the exit. And that might cost the car a little bit of time. So maybe it's the gearing's fault. 2nd might be a little too short. I'm not entirely sure about that, but either way, those are the main characteristics the car have. Pretty easy to drive. If you like this car, keep driving it. It's going to be competitive throughout the season on most of the tracks, if not all of them. Great car to drive. Super recommended. I was taken by surprise by the Lamborghini. I never really vibed with this car, but for some reason this season something clicked. Let's go over the bad things first. So, cold tires, rear snaps under braking a little bit, especially coming into low speed corners. But the advantage of that is once the tires are warm, you get really good rotation coming into low speed corners. So you can brake in deep and late, and the car will just rotate. And that really allows for very competitive driving. You can really try to dive bomb people. Not suggesting you should, but you can dive bomb people into corners and beat them to the apex because you can brake super late but still rotate the car. You're not going to wash out. That gives you a lot of confidence to make such moves. In terms of rotation and high speed, it's excellent both on entry, mid-corner, and exit. So it rotates well on entry. It doesn't wash out in the mid-corner, and once you hit the throttle, it keeps rotating. So you can gain a lot of speed from it, but somehow they managed to find a limit where it's not snappy. It doesn't scare you at all. So I mean, it does take some getting used to. Don't get me wrong, but I find it a lot more manageable now with the new tar model. I'm really liking this car. I'm thinking about seriously competing with it. On Road Atlanta, it's just it was so easy to be on the limit. I was fast with it from the first lap, and on Hungaroring, yeah, the cold tires were a bit of a problem. But once I got them warmed up, again, I kept reaching my well, I was pretty close to my optimal with it, so that's a good sign always. Pretty decent on the curbs. Pretty good on the curbs. It's a little too stiff. It's not the greatest car on the curbs. A little too stiff, but it somehow manages them well. So even if the car bounces around a lot, you can still steer. You can still get the power down. Not as good as the Porsche or other cars that I'll be talking about soon. The Mercedes, my spirit animal this past season. So I've driven this car all through the last season, season 3, and really liked it. The main thing I liked about that car is how predictable it is. It's really different now. They made some pretty big changes to the suspension, the aero balance, and combined with the new tar model, the car is a completely different beast. Right now, you have massive, and I do mean massive, lift-off oversteer. As soon as you lift off the throttle, the car rotates endlessly, and unless you catch it with the throttle, it will snap, even on warm tires. You really have to dance around the limit of the rear tires on entry, and that makes it very treacherous, especially on cold tires. And doesn't get resolved on warm tires. It just gets a little bit more manageable, but doesn't get resolved at all. It still does that, but after some time with it, I realized that's the key to its speed. So on Hungaroring, it's the fastest car I've driven, and yes, I'm used to it, but I don't think that's the reason. I think it's because I didn't get any understeer on entry on any corner, any of the corners. I just got as much rotation as I wanted, and as soon as I wanted to kind of stop the rotation, I just had to hit the throttle a little bit, stabilize it. It makes it very difficult to drive. It's very hard on the limit, and it's very hard to, and it's not the hardest car, maybe one of the hardest cars though, to extract speed from. It made it very tricky on turn 1 of Road Atlanta and turn 3. The car just did not want to comply because you need a little bit of stability on entry into turn 1 at Road Atlanta, and I had none of it. And I was running the sprint setup. The fixed one has 9 wing. This is not a low wing setup, and still had no stability. So on a place like Road Atlanta, where it used to be one of the best cars, I feel like now it's super hard to extract pace from. On the other hand, you put it on Hungaroring and it just excels because it's a very smooth track and not a lot of high-speed entries, a lot of low-speed entries where you have time to react and catch the rear end, and that really works for its advantage. Pretty decent on the curb, pretty good on the bumps as well. It's very good on bumpy surfaces. On the curbs, it's okay. It does have a tendency to bounce just a little bit, but not too much. Pretty manageable, but you definitely don't want to overdo it. Yeah, it's just I'm really confused about it right now. I thought I might jump into it again this season, and I'm really thinking about it. It seems like a completely different animal. I think I might give it a go on Hungaroring. It might be very fast there, but who knows? We'll see. So this is something I never thought I would say. The Audi is very similar to the Mercedes now, especially on fixed setup. So there's a ton of lift-off oversteer, but unlike the Mercedes, which I forgot to mention when I was talking about it, it doesn't have as much understeer on exit. So the Mercedes is super understeery on the power, but the Audi is not. The Audi still rotates a little bit. That makes it super quick on technical circuits. So on Hungaroring, it was excellent, but I couldn't drive. It was even more difficult than Mercedes on Road Atlanta. I wasn't even close to its true pace there, and I lost patience. I was like, all right, screw it. The car does not want to work here, and I'm not gonna spend 4 hours fighting it. I spent 30 minutes. I felt like that was enough for me to understand the car there and its characteristics. And let me tell you, it does not like Road Atlanta. It does like the technical bits. It does like the low speed corners, but the high speed entries, if it's very long, it's a very long corner with some altitude change. Turn 1, turn 3, doesn't like it. It doesn't get along with it. So I do love it though. I love the Audi. Don't get me wrong. On Hungaroring, I was enjoying it. I think it's the most rewarding car to drive on Hungaroring. It was one of the best ones out there. But you know, as an all-rounder, I wouldn't commit to it. You know what I mean? So occasionally when it's up there, definitely use it. It's a lot of fun to drive, but be careful, especially on cold tires. It does snap. Low speed, high speed entries. You lift off the throttle aggressively, the rear end is just gonna let go. I'm just happy it's relevant again. Basically, there are tracks where this season it's gonna be really good on, and I'm just happy we're gonna see it more because, you know, we haven't seen it at all last season. Has tons of pace, not easy to extract, not the most user-friendly car. So keep that in mind if you're considering it this season. Last but definitely not least is the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo, the new one. And let's start with the bad, because I love this car, but we should start with the bad thing. So on cold tires, the rear end has a tendency to snap on exit, so a little bit on power. You need to be careful, but it's not super unpredictable. You can manage it, and if you're a little more gentle and if you're short shifting on cold tires, it's very manageable. Under braking, the car is super solid, so there's no problem. It still has that, you know, typical Ferrari mid-corner understeer, which kind of washes out, but it's not as bad as it used to be with the old model, so it has been mitigated. It's still there, though. It's still part of the car. What sets this car apart, though, is how good it is on the curbs. It's very soft, so on tracks like Road Atlanta, you're not even feeling the curbs. It's by far the easiest one to drive on a bumpy track out of all the 8 GT3s that we're going to race this season. That and good high-speed handling is what makes this car very easy to drive, and it's easy to get it up to pace very quickly. The Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo is a gem. If you're new to GT3s, if you're a veteran trying to get a competitive car for this season, either way, this is my recommendation. I think I mean, there are tracks where other cars will be faster, but as an all-rounder, something to commit to, if you're not planning on buying a lot of GT3s, or you just want to get used to one car, I think that's the one to go for right now. But, you know, I guess it depends on driving style as well. I really like understeer. I get along with understeer better than I do with oversteer, so I'm more appreciative of how this car handles, and I like cars that are good on the curbs because I'm very aggressive on them. But other people would like something different, but for me, I'm really leaning towards it right now as an all-rounder. Guess time will tell. We'll see where the meta lies, and if people can find pace that I couldn't, and you know, learn new things. But for now, to end this video, I think the Ferrari, if you already own it, just be sure to give it a try. That's the least you can do at this point. If you don't own it, but you have some of the other cars, I don't think it's mandatory. I actually think there are really nice cars this season, and the BOP is pretty good. I found like a lot of the cars were really close together on pace, and even if you see cars that are like 2/10 off the fastest lap that I've done, a lot of it is down to my experience with the car, my driving style. So, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. If the pace isn't half a second off, chances are you're not gonna feel it that dramatically. So keep that in mind. That's it for my GT3 comparison guide. I really do hope you guys enjoyed it and found some value in this video. It did take me a long time to create, and I would appreciate it if you liked it, if you let me know what you thought about it in the comments, create a discussion over this, hop over to my Discord, and most importantly, if you want to see more of this, then subscribe to the channel. I'm always making videos about this and that. I do track guides for GT3s, race videos, and I'm gonna be getting into the new Porsche Cup as well, and maybe other things in the future, definitely other things in the future. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.